So this is the economic argument for why I'm making this policy decision.
Okay.
So
I didn't ask, but sure.
Inflation,
No.
yeah. So
I'll cut that.
But Jagmeet Singh, that's fine. Hi, I'm Jacob Kidd.
And I'm Lee McPherson.
It's the newest edition of your overworked passport clerk's favorite podcast.
It's Speech from the Throne, episode 16. We're here to bring you the latest and greatest from the halls of power.
But not with more Service Canada lines that stretch beyond the horizon. We're just here to argue.
Hey, Jacob, what are we discussing today?
Well, Liam, it's the same thing that everyone is discussing coast to coast to coast. That is the rising cost of living, the insane inflation that we are witnessing all across this country. 7.7% month over month, and with a steep rise in the previous 3 months. This temporary transitional inflation that we were all promised a few months ago seems to be becoming more permanent and more harsh than we could have imagined. And now real people's lives are being impacted on a massive scale. 25% of Canadians say that they may have to sell their homes if interest rates rise. And although that does seem like that could be the worst possible case scenario, it definitely is indicative of some major anxiety that is facing the whole populace. And unfortunately, we have a government right now that seems unwilling or unable to respond. Chrystia Freeland's speech announcing policy remedies to inflation was simply a rehash of elements that they had already announced in the budget. The government has had many times now, a week, to explain, to work back this disastrous policy announcement by Chrystia Freeland, and instead they have done what they always do. They double down. They say, no, you're just misunderstanding us. It's not our policies that are wrong. It's your comprehension that's wrong. And yes, we had announced these anti-inflation measures in the budget, but they're just being felt now. And so it's a messaging problem, not a policy problem. Well, that's obviously not going to cut it. There are many, many ways the government can tackle inflation. Of course, right now, the Conservatives, not just in this country, but all across the Western world, are suggesting that we have a gas tax cut. But the NDP, and this is where I'd like to focus our discussion, the NDP, I think, is introducing much more interesting policy remedies to inflation. Jagmeet Singh was on Power and Politics 2 days ago, the CBC news program, and he was suggesting that it's corporations, particularly large corporations in Canada, that are responsible for inflation, and that therefore it's those corporations that should have to pay for the inflation. He was saying that corporations essentially are profiting from this inflation, that grocery companies, for example, are making record profits, and that's why the cost of living is increasing for Canadians. And so the government should impose an excess profits tax on all of these additional profits, windfall profits, that large corporations have made, not just now, but throughout the past 2 years of the pandemic. The problem is, I think it sort of focuses the public discussion on an area that's a little too academic. It's blaming corporations for inflation, and that's just clearly not the case. Corporate greed certainly is a huge driving factor here, but I think anyone with any sense can probably determine that 2 years of people complaining about supply chain issues is going to have a way bigger impact on inflation than just, corporate greed. Because we can all assume that corporations were just as greedy today as they were greedy 2 years ago. That's not really causing a rise in prices. And so when you say, corporations cause the inflation, you're really founding your argument on a really, really bad logic model. But I think the NDP does have good sense in knowing where the public wants to go. They want these corporations to pay. They just need to find a better way of justifying it. Rather than arguing about who is causing inflation, what is causing inflation, we simply say this: inflation is happening. It's going to hurt someone. So we need to decide who it hurts. Is inflation going to hurt the people who have already been battered from 2 years of the pandemic? Or is it going to hurt the people who've been making record profits during the pandemic? Who is it going to hurt? Are we going to Are we going to force people to have their cost of living increase so they're making less and less and less in real terms? Or are we going to start taking back from those people that have made huge profits? We don't talk about what is causing inflation or why inflation is here. We simply say it's here. Now who's going to pay for it? That's the frame of the message that I would prefer to have. And that is how we're going to be able to sell policies like an excess profits tax. And I have more ideas for that I'll bring up in the future. But for now, I'll pass it off to you, Liam, and see what your thoughts are on this reframing of the message.
I think framing has always been the issue because it's center-left governments or neoliberal governments sort of flanking the right and the left have been too nervous to go after corporations. I don't know if that's, I'm sure it's due in part to lobbying like everything else, but I'm sure there's other reasons. And I don't know, they just haven't gone after corporations. And, sure, there's an argument to be made that, sure, we're under a capitalistic society right now, regardless of how we feel about that. But that's the system we're in right now, and corporations are going to make profit. But when you've got businesses like Loblaw who have been raking in record profits year over year, but then couldn't extend their employees' hero pay, they called it, for more than a month into the pandemic. And I'm not laughing because that's funny. I'm laughing because it's pathetic. They don't care about their workers. They're mammoth corporations. They rake in the tens of billions of dollars, at a minimum. You've got Irving, you've got the McCains, all those big boys need to pay up, and a lot of people joke around that Canada is 3 oligopolies in a trench coat. And I wonder how true that is, because it seems to be right on the nose to me. And there has to be a point where if corporations know what a living wage is, if they know the kind of money that people need to earn to put bread on the table for their families, and they still refuse to step up despite record year-over-year profits, then somebody has to step in my opinion. If the corporations aren't going to do it voluntarily, somebody has to step in. There's no reason for grocery stores and other places to be making record profits as people are gouged at their stores from item to item to item, and their workers are making nothing and getting off sick with COVID and then having to lose their apartments or homes or whatever. It's just kind of unacceptable to me. So I think that your logic is sound. I mean, I've seen some circles further to the left that have pushed for the nationalization of things like grocery stores. I worry because whenever government gets into business like that, they're not the best at setting prices, I find. I mean, maybe somebody could prove why I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know if they would deliver in the best way. So we almost have to, as Jacob is saying, force their hand to do it without nationalizing them. So maybe we mandate. Jacob, you can get a little bit more into this, but I remember you were telling me privately before we recorded that you wanted to have some sort of a royalty system, kind of like almost similar to the oil industry, where the public, like the taxpayer, earns a royalty from a corporation based on, their profits over a certain limit. Is that the idea, or how would that work practically?
Well, see, royalties work before profits. So this is the problem that conservative critics keep bringing up to the NDP solution. So the NDP solution is excess profits are being taxed. And essentially the conservative criticism, and actually the Liberal government has made the same criticism, is that, well, we already tax the profits of corporations, so as those profits increase, we get more in taxes. And it is true that the Canadian government is going to have much more revenue this year than in any other year before, simply because they're making these record profits, and of course, just in nominal terms, as there is inflation, the amount of money that you're getting is increasing, even if that money is worth less. The issue with that is that profits are so easy to hide in our tax system, and not to mention like the Panama Papers and how easy it is to move money away. Royalty systems work before profits. Royalty is taking a cut of the gross revenue, and you're valuing the resource as it is, and you're forcing companies to pay you, the taxpayer, ahead of time before they're making profits on something. Now, the person sitting back at home might say, okay, well, I can understand why you do that for oil, because that's a resource in the ground, and that's clearly owned by the people of Alberta, so of course companies should have to pay the people of Alberta something to take that oil before they sell it. But you see, the way that our nation is set up, it's a really large geography, but with a very small population. And that sort of assumes that there's always going to be natural monopoly in almost every single industry. Why? Because it takes a huge capital investment to set up a Canada-wide corporation. So much of an investment that in almost every industry, there's only one or two corporations that can actually afford to invest in those startup costs of building all of your logistics operations all across the country. But it's only a one-time cost. Once you've spent all that money, you have it set up, and you're virtually a monopoly. You can charge whatever cost you want. And Canadians have noticed this for a long time. My girlfriend's from China. She mentions this all the time. Stuff costs way, way more in Canada than it costs anywhere else. And that's because of this. We have a lot of monopolies or oligopolies in almost every single industry because of the way that our economy and our nation is structured. So what I'm saying is Canada itself is the resource. The way that our country is structured is the natural resource. We allow corporations to produce a natural monopoly where they can charge whatever price they want to the consumers. That is the way that our country is set up. And so, because our country is set up in this way, we, the public that lives in this country, we, the public that owns the country, should be charging these corporations royalties for the way that our country is structured. We are the resource, and they should be paying us for that resource, for access to that resource. Particularly if you think of like the big telecom.
Telecom?
Oh, I can't believe I said that. The big telecom companies. There's 2 railroads in Canada. There are 3 telecom companies in Canada. 4 if you count the small Quebec ones and the small Saskatchewan and Manitoba ones, but whatever. There are 3 big guys. And those were all government monopolies that were later privatized. So in those cases, there's no reason why we, the public, aren't getting a cut of that. We used to get a cut of that, and then because once the neoliberals took over, we decided we'll sell it. And we haven't gotten a cut ever since. In fact, we've just been completely raked over the coals with these guys marching up the profits over and over and over again because they're still monopolies. They're just privatized monopolies. So I'm saying, rather than this excess profits tax that the NDP is doing, that you know the system. They're going to play the system. They're going to play whatever games they can with their tax accountants. Royalty is you pay us first, and then you get to make your profits on top of that. So that's the plan that I would recommend. Now, would I sell that to the public that way? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I think we need to talk more and more about these monopolies, and we need to talk about the Canadian oligarchs. Because these monopolies have created a couple of families that are so powerful, that are so integrated into our political and economic system, that we literally, even though we know they are absolutely destroying the average Canadian family with these prices, these increases, we don't know what to do about them. We don't know how to remove their power, and we're too afraid to even talk about it in the public sphere. Because especially like you think of someone like the Irvings own like all of Atlantic Canada. No one can stand up to the Irvings. Why do we allow this? We talk about the Russian oligarchs and we're fighting against the Russian oligarchs. It's the Canadian oligarchs we need to get after. This is the sort of framing we need to be talking about in our messaging.
Agreed, because I think that kind of strong messaging would catch on with the public. If you don't give the public any reason to realize what Loblaw and other corporations do to take advantage of record profits, you're not going to be able to villainize them. In order to villainize somebody, you have to call them an oligarch, whether or not it's technically true. But really, whether or not it's technically true, it's practically true. And
so the thing is like the Westons and the Irvings are wealthier than any of the Russian oligarchs.
Rich. They're filthy rich.
They're so rich. They're not as politically powerful as the Russian oligarchs, but they're absolutely wealthier in monetary terms.
And quite powerful domestically, politically, I would say. But
yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like everything you outlined there. I think obviously again, like you can't sell it to the public directly that way. You have to present it more as a kind of, it's time these oligarchs paid their fair share, and
yeah, exactly.
Everybody's struggling. They can't afford to put food on the table. These guys are doling out the exec bonuses, and we've had enough. Like, as the minute you lay that out for people, it becomes crystal clear. I can't see anybody I can't see many people anyway going like, well, maybe we should leave Loblaw alone, like aside from maybe some conservative voters, but probably some conservative voters would want to go after Loblaw as well.
Well,
Like, I think
we found them price-fixing bread. Like, that's the one thing we
Yeah,
caught
it's
them.
true.
We've also found the gas companies were price-fixing gas a few years ago. We know that these price increases are just being made in some, like, boardroom with the 2 or 3 companies that control the whole market. Now it's time for us to get into that conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, the NDP... I don't think they have the right leadership federally as well. I think I'm slowly making that conclusion, to be honest with you. I don't think they have the right leadership federally, and that includes Singh, but it includes people like Anne McGrath, who I respect for what they were able to bring to the table, but who have been there too long, and it's time to go. And I think Jagmeet Singh's appearance on Power and Politics with sort of yet again another kind of incoherent line of reasoning that everybody pokes holes in. You can't be the flag bearer for progressivism in Canada, which he is for a lot of people our age. A lot of people our age really like him, and then expect to gain traction with other voters in more traditional mediums by just going down into the studio and with a something written on a napkin that you and your advisors came up with. You gotta have a realistic argument. Jagmeet's been around the block enough. He should know that not only is Vashi smart, but the people who watch your show are massive Politico nerds for the most part. So everybody's going to poke holes in you if you don't come on with a convincing argument. That includes anybody from any party stripe. Look at Marco Mendicino trying to talk about the Emergencies Act or whatever. Like, you can cite government examples, Tory examples, but Jagmeet can't be exempted just because he's a likable guy on TikTok who has some, I'll admit, good ideas. He doesn't sell them right. So, there's space now for, it could even be the Conservatives, to be honest. It'd fit Pierre Poilievre's brand, except for the Thatcherism, part, because she generally tended to leave corporations and let them do what they wanted. But it does fit his sort of anti-institution brand. It's something that the Tories could import, but I doubt that they would ever try it.
No, the Tories are going to respond to it by just cutting every tax in the book, basically. That's going to be their response. And, of course, it's going to be the wealthy that will benefit the most from that.
Yeah.
Ordinary people will still pay the regular taxes, and then it's going to be the corporations and the wealthy people are going to be like, awesome, I get to write off even more stuff.
Yeah, and I think the Liberals are going to sell, not sell, they're going to buy our sympathies. I think that's their plan, though.
Yeah.
I think the NDP, my prediction, and I could be very wrong here, listeners, but my prediction is that the NDP is going to convince the Liberals to send money to every Canadian or something. And, like, I'm not against every Canadian getting sent money. It's just sometimes if you do something like that, you can get attacked by the opposition side for, oh, look at you printing more money. You're just making it worse.
Well, it would make it worse.
So, it generally makes inflationary cycles worse when you overspend. Yeah. But I do predict that that's what they're going to do because it's easy and flashy. I predict that that's going to be their response.
So this is the economic argument for why I'm making this policy decision.
I didn't ask, but sure.
There actually is some strong economic theory. So Jagmeet Singh was saying economists tell us, which maybe that's true, and I think there's reason why economists would be advising the NDP to use a wealth tax or an excess profit tax, because the only way that inflation cycle stops is if people spend less. If people see increasing costs and they say, okay, that's too much for me, I'm not going to buy that. But let's just think a little bit about the implications of this for different classes of people. If a poor person is saying, that's too expensive, I can't buy this, they're saying that about, like, meat. They're saying that about vegetables. They're saying about stuff they need to live. They're saying, like, oh, rent is too expensive, I can't buy that.
Yeah.
Then if that's true for them, that means they're homeless.
Yeah.
Whereas a rich person, if they say, oh, this is too expensive, I can't buy that, it means they're not buying a third house. It means they're not buying a second boat. It means they're not buying a Maserati or something like that. It's a complete different meaning to those two people. And wealthy people, they're much more inelastic when it comes to the effects of their purchasing power in the increases of prices. They can continue to buy just as much even as the cost is increasing because they're assuming that they can always pass those costs on to consumers down the line. So their behavior doesn't change that much in an inflationary cycle. What this policy would do is force them to change their behavior in an inflationary cycle because it was literally making the wealthy poorer. They can't just pass those costs on to the consumers and keep overspending as they are doing. This is the thing, and I think this is where the media has the absolute ass backwards wrong focus, because everyone's saying, oh, the cause of inflation is people are leaving their homes and they're going on vacation. No, the cause of inflation is we have a wealthy class of parasites who have been buying up yachts. They've been buying up their super houses. They've been consuming all of this real estate in Toronto and Vancouver, driving up prices to unimaginable ways, and they're going to continue to do it no matter what the costs are, because they're just an attractive investment opportunities. It's the wealthy who are overspending, who are overindulging, and who are so insulated from the consequences of their behavior that they don't know when to stop. That's what's driving this inflationary cycle. Poor people, the instant something goes up, they have to spend less. They have no choice because their savings have been completely destroyed by the pandemic. So if we're going to stop this inflationary cycle, we got to hit the people who are actually driving the inflation, and that's wealthy people who won't stop spending because costs are going up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, sir. And again, all it takes is, shocking, a party with balls to do what needs to be done.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's why I don't know if it will happen, but it definitely is the correct thing to do. I mean, we've waited too long. We've given these companies such a long leash. I don't know if you know, listeners, how much we pay in sell rates compared to international partners.
Oh,
we get
silly,
gouged. We
ridiculous.
get absolutely gouged. And Rogers, Bell and Telus' excuses because of the large land mass. It costs a lot more. And there's a little bit of truth to that, but not a lot.
It cost more 40 years ago when they laid the lines.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost more now.
Well, and also we're going to upgrade to 5G soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 2 and number 3 is the amount in which they've gouged the prices are way higher than the cost.
With the slowest speeds and the highest prices.
Yep, they always throttle. They throttle the speeds, and then when they're asked, it's always hilarious when they're asked to cut their rates. Like the CRTC has pathetically and weekly let out a few half-hearted kind of hey guys, you really got to cut your prices, because hey, does everybody remember when Justin Trudeau said he promised to cut your sell prices? Did that happen? Did that work out? Probably not, because he didn't do it because, I don't know, lobbying. To center my thoughts here, we're getting ripped off, and we've been getting ripped off for decades. Same with internet rates. We pay ridiculously high internet rates compared to similar jurisdictions to us, and we just accept it. There's just so many ridiculous things that we've let go on so long, with a small select group of companies in very important industries to this company, no competition, and not a whole lot of oversight or ability to enforce. So that's why we're where we're at today. And I don't think it can be sustainable for people, especially in this inflationary cycle, which is going to last at least another year or two. People's patience is shrinking, and some people are going to lash out at government for sure, particularly if their solution is to send you checks. That might pacify some swing voters, but I think the Liberals are trying to bank on the fact that usually a year or two after it's really bad, it kind of gets better, and they're hoping, I think it'll get better by the time re-election comes up, but I still don't think that will do anything about the stinking albatross of their record around their neck.
It's just as likely that it could get worse by then. It's such a high-risk strategy.
It is. Yeah. And I don't think they'll have the right solution.
No. I think it's common knowledge that we have this class of parasites that are feeding off of us. When I'm talking to policy experts and there's no microphone on them, they're more than willing to admit this to me. But the reason why people are afraid to regulate these monopolies is because we know that there is a really high entryway into the Canadian market, because it's so expensive to invest and build a business here because of the size of our geography relative to our population. And so the fear is, if we overregulate these guys, if we overtax these guys, they're going to leave and there's going to be no one to replace them. And maybe in an ordinary world, that might be true. But I think that this argument is failing to prophesize just how much our world is going to evolve and how rapidly this transition is already happening. So already with the war in Ukraine, food prices in general are increasing all across the world. And they're increasing at the same time that gas prices are increasing. Well, the last time this happened at this scale was in the early 2010s, right before and leading to the Arab Spring. We know right now that governments around the world, particularly in Africa and in the Middle East, are even weaker today because of the pandemic than they were in 2010 when the Arab Spring began. So we can almost be certain there is going to be some massive political shifts as major starvation begins to enter these countries. There's going to be a famine that we have never witnessed before. It's already predicted that there's going to be 10, 50 million people at least will starve to death this year, as opposed to the usual 5 million that starve to death, which is, again, way too high. But it's going to be at least double to 3 times as much the UN's estimating, and it could be more. The political implications of this are going to be huge. The turmoil that's going to be rendering all around the world. Already, millions of Ukrainians are refugees. There's going to be refugees from every country in this region, potentially, if there's massive turmoil like the Arab Spring again. And what is a top destination for many of the refugees coming? It's going to be Canada. Because at the same time that there's going to be all these refugees, Canada is going to be one of the few countries in the world, hopefully, that hasn't completely fallen back to fascism, that is still multicultural, that's still willing to let people in. And usually, because we're so far away, it's wealthier people that come first in these waves of refugees. So I don't give a shit if the rich people here think that they're being unfairly persecuted against and they flee Canada. We know there's going to be a bunch of other people coming to take their places because anywhere else in the world, they're going to worry that they're going to die. We in Canada have built an open, fair, multicultural society. It's time for us to cash in on that. We have a huge advantage, and in a world that is getting more dangerous, that is getting more hateful, more factionalized, we are going to become a top destination for all of these people, and it's time for us to realize that and cash in on it, rather than continuing to be the victims of this parasitic class that's trying to convince us that we can't do better than them. We can do better than them. We are doing better than them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if I could say it any better than that, man. Why don't we move to the practicality of all this? Like, what is the realistic possibility of something like this getting done? I think part of the benefit, some of the benefits, just before I get back to the practicality of this actually happening, some of the benefits that corporations enjoy right now is relative
anonymity,
lack of knowledge, anonymity, but lack of knowledge among the public about just how much they're getting gouged. Like, a lot of people don't realize how much things cost, and compared to other countries, and how much we're paying compared to other countries for a lot of this stuff. Particularly, a lot of these industries run by a small group of corporations. They use every opportunity to cut corners and charge us more because they can.
But in an inflationary environment, when every dollar counts, that's when Canadians are going to start realizing how much they're getting gouged.
But they have
like,
to be.
It's going to become obvious.
They have to be aided by politicians, though. But I do think more people will become aware.
And that's why I think the excess profit tax is it's getting in that area where people are starting to be more aware. Like, there does seem to be a budding class consciousness, I would say, amongst Canadians. I'm seeing a lot of also union pushes in Starbucks or in other service jobs. If there's a unionization drive, then that's also a really helpful thing, and politicians should be helping this as well, because we can be raising wages of the workers that are in these corporations as well, and that will also increase the affordability of day-to-day life too. That's something that's not just a government policy, that's more of a bottom-up strategy.
Yeah, exactly. The trouble is, I mean, I got to be honest, my analysis isn't too long on the practicality of this getting done. I don't think it will, because it seems like whatever rocks we throw at it, the lobby for these companies has always prevailed, no matter what, because it's easier than doing a massive systemic thing that you'd have to explain. And governments have so much on their plate, it's easy for them to take the easy way out sometimes. But I mean, I hope to God it does get done, or maybe in a minority parliament situation, maybe an opposition party forces the government of the day to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, if I'm prognosticating here, my guess is that the most likely outcome is that the government falls as inflation gets worse and worse and worse. The NDP thinks that they have an opportunity to score big. Of course, they miscalculate, so the government collapses. Pierre Poilievre is elected with a huge majority and just repeals every single tax we have in the country, and we live in anarchy.
I mean, he does strike me as somebody who would be quite radical. I mean, everybody said that about Stephen Harper, and he wasn't. Not necessarily
radical in a pro-corporate way. Like, that is an interesting part of the evolution of the Conservative Party, especially when he starts attacking the governor of the Bank of Canada. Like, there's no corporation in Canada that would ever recommend going after the central bank. Like, that is really hurting the stability that's required to make profits in a country like Canada. You really do need to have perfect stability in order to make profit here, because you have these really heavy upfront capital investment costs. And if you're spending like a huge amount of money, you need to make sure the next 40, 50 years are going to be relatively stable so you can pay off that huge initial investment. And when you're going after the Bank of Canada, you're really undermining that stable regime that has been a cornerstone of the Canadian economic model. Pierre Poilievre does strike me as someone it's really hard to tell like what he would do. I don't think he'd necessarily be a corporate shill. He seems to be uncontrolled by almost anyone, but the difficulty is like if he's not a corporate shill, he could be just as well a shill for the KKK or like something far worse than a court. Like we might long for the days that we had corporate shills in office if we let Pierre Poilievre in.
I mean, you know what's funny is I discovered there's another famous Canadian political figure who went after the bank governor of the Bank of Canada. And his name is Jean Chrétien.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Went after David Dodge.
Yeah, and that was a big piece of his campaign. I wondered if this was just conservatives being conservatives. It's been done on the liberal side as well, though, of course, Poilievre's argument is to fit the conservative worldview.
And Jean Chrétien had the Big Red Book.
It was a very left platform.
Exactly, like he had this very radical platform that, of course, got abandoned when he
did none of
entered. Yeah, he did. Well, it didn't do just none of it. He did the opposite with Paul Martin in charge of the finance ministry, like the complete opposite. Pierre Poilievre could be that guy, but he's never given us any indication that he would be that guy. And there certainly doesn't seem to be a Paul Martin-esque force in the Conservative Party that wants to moderate it. It's, if anything, Pierre Poilievre is more afraid of the more radical factions in his party that are trying to push it more and more to the fringes.
Well, and even the Liberal Party, it sounds like it has some more centrist people, getting nervous too. The Hill Times reported a few days ago that there was a massive majority of Liberal MPs in caucus who were against continuing the mandates, which struck me as maybe like a little bit of a surprise considering their historic loyalty, but I think the cracks are starting to show, and this is one of them. The government has been nothing but incoherent for the past month. Like everything they've said has just been like, what? It's just extremely bizarre. It's like they're kind of lost in the woods and can't find their way out, and I'm sure they're grateful that they're rising for the summer, the House, and they'll get a little break and people will stop paying attention because they sure haven't done a good job the past month.
But like that's what I don't get is like they're just coasting to the break. Like the summer break, sure, it's not busy in Parliament, but this is when inflation's going to be even worse because every summer gas prices always increase in Canada on a cyclical way. So it's like if we're seeing bad inflation now, it's going to be much worse in the summer, and the only message that they've given us is here are all these things that we're going to do in the budget anyways, and that's what we're going to do for you, Canada. Like, oh, maybe we'll reduce your dental costs for children. Like that's your response. Like, come on, you have to leave some sort of message to us. You got to tell us something about how you're going to help us. It can't just be listen harder to what we said already. Like, come on, guys.
No, and that's their signature thing is they'll always go out and re-announce things when it's convenient, right? It's easier than presenting something new and thoughtful. It's become a business, and it's become a cynical sort of like showmanship. Like how can we coast through 4 years of doing the least difficult things as possible and still looking good. The sad part is I think they're like one of the best governments to come along in a long time, and they think that they're a historic progressive government. I genuinely think that they think they're historic regardless of what they do, which is why they kind of scaled down their ambitions. They're like, well, no one's done this anyway, so.
No, I love Chantal Hébert's piece where she said that this government only does anything when it's up against a wall.
Yeah.
And that deal with the NDP, that deal with the NDP just basically pushed the wall a few years down the road. So now it's like they can do whatever they want for 3 years, and what they want is literally nothing. I think that's clearly what the government thought is, we just bought a few more years to take our breath, and then we'll plan a really good campaign for 2025, and that's where we're going to get our majority back. Like that seems to
Trudeau's going to run again.
Yeah, that seems to be the only focus of the government is we're going to take these years to plan a better election campaign rather than we're going to take these years to transform the country. Or what we need right now is we got to take this time to help people that are literally on the verge of starving to death, because that is how bad inflation is getting. Like, come on, the interests of this government are so out of whack with the public.
I'm not gonna lie, like that's part of what's been leading me to the conclusion that maybe the NDP don't have it together, like the senior leadership, that they really just, I mean, I've known they haven't had it together to win an election, but I mean, like, really, maybe they really don't have it together. And the reason I say that is because, like, I think it's common knowledge that Trudeau wants to try to run again. It's assumed. I mean, he's obviously not going to say he doesn't want to run again until whenever he tenders his resignation, whether that's on an election night or whether that's before. Nobody really knows what he wants to do, but I'm predicting, based on his record, that they've been chasing this elusive second majority for 7 years now, and I don't think they're going to get it ever under him again. I mean, Trudeau's have proved us wrong in the past. Like Trudeau, the senior, was sent packing in 1979, came back 9 months later with a massive majority. Anything can happen. Never say never, but it seems extremely unlikely that he would ever get another majority or minority if he stays on as leader. I worry that that's exactly what he's going to do. Coast for 3 years, put in some pathetic performative legacy promise that does effectively nothing but sounds good. So he goes out with everybody thinking that he's great, but they still want him to go. Like, they still wouldn't reelect him. So he kind of, does his dance off into the sunset while the NDP achieves effectively nothing. And it's really like times like these are the times for the NDP to put their foot down. So I hope to God that there are some backroom conversations going on. And I hope to God that the NDP are like, you morons, you need to do something now. And that they do threaten to tear up the agreement if they don't, because that's exactly what I think what Canadians expect, and why I think a lot of Canadians accept the Liberal NDP agreement. Yes, it guarantees a certain level of stability, but they also expect that the NDP will hold the Liberals accountable. And the NDP took a big risk, because usually these kind of agreements don't reflect well on the smaller party. And so if they want to have a legacy where this reflects well on them, they need to be seen to be doing something. They can't go on Power and Politics, spout a bunch of mumbo jumbo about stats that aren't true or are misrepresenting things, and expect to kind of coast for the next 3 years saying, well, at least we got dental care for kids. No, you have to do a lot better than that.
Yeah, so I do think that the shadow of Trudeau's father definitely changes the way that the Trudeau the younger looks at this political situation and calculates what the highest possible risk is. I mean, I think that they've probably examined the Conservative electoral performance in 2019, 2021, and he's just assuming, well, the best that Pierre Poilievre can manage in 3 years is a minority, and so it's just going to be another Joe Clark situation at the very worst, where maybe I have to go, but then Pierre is such a disaster that they'll be begging me back, just like they did with my dad, and then I'll get my majority finally, and I'll be able to do all the things that my dad was able to do with his last majority and transform the country then.
Yeah, like he'll do anything.
Yeah, like the problem is that we're just in a totally different context, and yeah. Joe Who was a completely different political actor and a much worse political actor than Pierre Poilievre ever was.
But with more principles in his pinky finger than Pierre Poilievre.
Well, exactly. Like, that's why he was a bad politician, was because he actually believed in something. Whereas Pierre Poilievre is much stronger as a communicator.
He believes in stuff, but he's a hypocrite.
Yeah. And he speaks French, which Joe Clark didn't, and at the time that he became prime minister. And as well, the Liberals are way weaker in Quebec now than they were in that election, so they had a base in which to fall back on. Whereas, like, now there's a possibility where if the Liberals fall back to the mid-20s, they're not going to have 100 plus seats. They're going to have 30 seats in the election. And that's the thing that I think that Trudeau is really miscalculating, is that the possibility of the Liberals falling back to third place is much higher than in the days of his dad. And so I think he's just completely misreading the worst case scenarios here. He's just chasing that last majority. He really convinced himself that this is a possibility. He can get this last majority. And I think all of his decisions are all based on, I'm working my way up to getting this last majority, rather than doing the best he can with the power he has now.
That's what I find incredible. Like, they're so fixated on this last majority, as if they would do more during that time than they did during their first majority, which is next to nothing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, and again, like I can already hear people who are sympathetic to the Liberals going, well, they've done a lot more than other people. And it's like, it's true, but like, they've so cynically done more than other people. They've had to be dragged to do more than other people a lot of the times. And they're aware that, as a former minister once said, hard things are hard. And it seems, as a trend throughout their entire tenure, They haven't wanted to do the hard things. They haven't wanted to. It's not because not as if they couldn't have gotten it done. It would have taken, I think, more poise and I would argue more competency than they had. I don't think that they're by any means an incompetent government, but I do think that there can be competency gaps like this, or almost like this cynicism that sets in where they just think they can coast. It's very strange. It's like, let's do enough to please people who nervously switched over from conservative to liberal in 2015 and gave us a chance, instead of being a legacy builder like my father. The saddest part of all is they do think they're legacy builders.
Yeah, but and that's the problem with the shadow that always is going to overhang Justin Trudeau, is that I think in the first few years of Pierre Trudeau's mandates, he also didn't really do a whole lot. There was a lot of kicking the tires that went on, and that's why he was reduced just as Justin was, from a majority to a minority in his second election. And
I mean, he did get the charter done, so that saved him.
That's the thing, is like that stuff that we remember Trudeau for is in the last majority. That's after he came back. Those 4 years of 80 to 84 was when almost everything we associate with Trudeau's legacy was in that time.
Except for the energy program, that was during his majority.
But the energy program, again, was really transformative, and it happened in the 1980s as well. So, like, it's I do think that a lot of the biggest things that Trudeau did, positive or negative, they were in the latter part of his reign. And I think that Justin Trudeau is thinking that he's going to repeat that history, or is imagining that he needs that majority in order to do these projects that he has. And you can sort of see that he's aligning his provincial allies in a similar way that Pierre Trudeau had. Pierre Trudeau, I believe he was the same time he had Bill Davis and he had Peter Lougheed in Alberta and in Ontario. And maybe Justin Trudeau's thinking, well, I finally have this bromance going on with Doug Ford. Now Jason Kenney's out, so I'm going to wait until Rachel Notley's back in.
Yeah.
And maybe he has some plan that he actually wants to enact. He's just building all the cards, but he's waiting way too long, and he's waiting for a circumstance that may never happen when he has the power to do stuff now.
That's what I'm thinking, and I probably would have said the same thing about Pierre Trudeau if I was alive then.
Yeah.
You had 7 years, or in his case, 11 years. And then he was somehow granted a fourth majority, which is in itself remarkable. After a 9-month sort of timeout, you go over there and sit on the couch and think about all the big government you've created, and then when you've thought about it, you come back and you do a charter, God damn it! And so he did one, and then he did an energy program, and that screwed the Liberals for the next decade. But that's another tale for another time.
And two ends of the country too. It's amazing that you can fuck yourself over in diametrically opposed regions. That's amazing. It's a great political feat.
Yeah, just something else. And then Mulroney tried to sort of band-aid everything together with Charlottetown and with Meech, and
it made it worse. Yeah,
it also failed. And then we had the referendum, and we almost lost Quebec, and now we're here. So, I mean, I don't know. You could be right. I could be wrong. Trudeau might come in, get a fourth mandate, either back to back, like first one to do it since Laurier, back to back to back. People say MacDonald, but that's not true. I don't know why everybody says MacDonald, because he lost. Laurier is the only prime minister to win 4 straight elections. Yep. And so, for that reason, it's historically quite unlikely that Trudeau will pull it off. But maybe you're right. Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he'll do something transformative, and then maybe it would shut up a lot of my criticisms of him. But I criticize him because it seems like whatever he can do, it's only the bare minimum. Instead of adding dental care to a healthcare plan so that people don't have their teeth falling out, it's for kids under 12. It's always micro targeted. It's always hyper limited, and I don't think you can expect to be viewed as somebody who is bringing in systemic change and just do the the bare minimum. Their assault rifle legislation, their handgun legislation. It's so cynical. It doesn't even ban a lot of similar guns. It only bans like a few specific ones. I mean, not a few, more than a few. But there are a lot of guns that they didn't ban that are quite similar and arguably more dangerous. But nobody knows that because they see the flashy headline, Liberals bring in gun ban, and it looks great. That's the problem, is they do what's flashy. But as soon as you take 10 seconds to look beyond the curtain of what they've done, it's usually a Band-Aid solution or it's half-assed.
Yep.
And that's what I don't like about them. Of course they did more than Stephen Harper did. Of course. Sure. But you have to remember that when people gave him a majority in 2015, they expected him to be a once-in-a-generation Pierre Trudeau type figure or Wilfrid Laurier type figure, and he absolutely has not been. If he can manage to secure childcare by the end of his mandate, he might have a nice legacy, and I think maybe that might be the one thing he'll succeed at. Like, yes, he secured all the agreements, but securing programs up and running and making sure everything's functioning fine, then I think that'll sort of cap off something of a legacy, but I mean, it's nothing compared to what people thought he would be.
And PP can always come into government and tear up all those agreements.
I think he's already on record saying he would.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to fact check that, listeners, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, it doesn't matter whether he says it or not. We know he's going to do that. That's just his ideology.
We know he's likely to.
Exactly. It's one, it's a government program, and two, it helps poor people. Well, that's the two worst things you can possibly do as a conservative. So of course he's going to remove it, and as a radical like him.
Well, do you have any final thoughts on this before we send people streaming to the exits?
I think it's a similar through line that we've had through most of our episodes, where we're facing huge challenges, and there needs to be a commensurate government response. We had that in the first few weeks of the pandemic. We had it in the first few weeks of the Ukraine crisis. When this government is against a wall, it can act. But right now, it's failing to see the wall that it's up against, and it's convinced itself that it has more time than it has. It needs to act now, otherwise it will fall, and PP is at the wings, ready to radically transform our country in ways we do not want to see. So if that's going to be avoided, this government has better start finding some policies that are going to help real people now.
And on that usually cheery note, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Speech from the Throne. If you have any thoughts to share with us, any tips, any new recipes, any new movies you've been watching, you can send it to speechfromthethrone@gmail.com. That's speechfromthethrone@gmail.com. And take care of yourselves in the meantime. We will talk to you in a week's time.